Well, that gospel, of course, is the short version. And in the long version it says, "But I say to you, whoever is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. And whoever says to his brother, Raka, which is answerable, he will be answerable to the Sanhedrin. And whoever says, you fool, will be liable to fiery Gehenna." So it's all about anger and road rage. We all know what that is. I was reading during the week about Michael Landon. You remember Michael Landon? Of course. When he was 19 years old, he got a small acting part the first time. I think he was paid something like $240. So for him back then at 19 years, it was a lot of money. So he decided to head for Beverly Hills, which he hardly ever visited. And he's walking along this street, and he comes to a toy store. And there are two kids outside with their noses pressed against the window, looking at all these wonderful toys. So he stopped to talk to them, and he said, "What are you looking at?" One kid says, I'm looking at the airplane. And the other said, "Well, I'm looking at the truck." So he said, "Well, let's go inside and have a look." And he did, and he bought the truck and the airplane for the two kids. And he says the delight on these kids was just extraordinary. But the thing that struck him most of all, that the joy and the satisfaction that it gave him for being so kind to these two kids. It was a lesson he would never forget. He's driving down the freeway in Los Angeles. It's hot, humid. The traffic is horrendous. And there's nothing but road rage, open windows, cursing, and what have you. And as he reflects upon that, he begins to think, could you imagine if that energy was channeled in the right way, what a difference it would make? You know that. You experience road rage as I do. Sometimes I'm guilty too. But of course, it's the wrong kind of energy. And if we translate that into works of kindness, it makes an awful difference. And he goes on to talk about how he got the idea of, I think it was Highway to Heaven was the show, I think. And they tried to base it on incidents in people's lives. And they wanted to do an episode on children's cancer. And they found this young boy who had cancer. In fact, he lost one of his legs. But compounding it was that he had a stammer. And yet they wanted this kid. And he was told, "You are an actor. You are an actor with a stammer. That's all." And so they gave him the part. And in the practice, he did very well. And in the actual movie, there was no stammer whatsoever. In 2 years, his cancer, Michael says, went into remission, and he lost his stammer. All because people took an interest in him and encouraged him and helped him. He got rid of his cancer. Kindness, kindness, kindness. And that's really what Jesus is talking about, at least part of what he's talking about. Rather than screaming and cursing and what have you, and using that energy in a very useless way. 4 years ago, an obituary appeared in the Los Angeles Times. The obituary was about Sister Antonia Brenner. Who was Sister Antonia? She was the daughter of Irish immigrants in Los Angeles. Her father had his own business, paper supply store. And he had a lot of important visitors like Gary Grant. They lived in Beverly Hills, surrounded by the stars. Growing up, she got a very, very good education. Married, 7 children, 4 daughters, 3 sons. Divorced, remarried, divorced. And then in 1977, she got rid of her beautiful apartment in Ventura, got rid of all her expensive clothes and belongings, got into her car, and drove all the way to Tijuana in Mexico, to the prison called La Mesa, the table. She had been there before because she was involved in charity works all her life. But now that her children were grown and on their own, she decided now she would dedicate herself to helping prisoners. And in fact, she did. She spent the rest of her life there, making a tremendous impression on everybody. Indeed, one of the prisoners said this about her: "I'm not a religious man. I'd spent 2 years in another prison before I came to La Mesa and had turned off all my feelings and turned off the world. She's the most warm, caring person to walk the face of the earth. Her love and kindness has changed the life of every prisoner here." What an incredible tribute to pay to this one. And in the prison, they had a custom of any new prisoner. They had a thing called the grito in Spanish, meaning the scream, the shout or the scream. So any new prisoner had to walk down between all the other prisoners and officers and so on. And while he did that, he had to shout his name, his crime, and his sentence. That was the ritual. But before that prisoner began the walk, this white-haired, blue-eyed lady would say and shout out, "Do not be frightened or embarrassed. The Lord was a prisoner, just like you. You have something in common. So remember that when you walk through the grito." She gave the end of her life in kindness to all these prisoners. And as this prisoner said, she changed the life of all of them. Kindness. She died 4 years ago, and the obituary was in the Los Angeles Times. And it ended up by saying she was waked at a nearby funeral home. And the prisoners in La Mesa got special permission at their request to visit the funeral home. 700 did. And not one of them failed to return to the prison, which spoke volumes about Sister Antonia Brenner. She's a wonderful example for all of us. Not that we have go down to the prison in Miami or Fort Lauderdale. No, of course not. Every day of our lives, we're surrounded with opportunities to reach out in kindness to all our brothers and sisters. That's what Jesus is talking about. Not theology. He's talking about practical demonstration of Christian love and kindness to all our brothers and sisters. Or as a famous poet once said, the nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and of love.